اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تباركت يا ذا الجلال والإكرام.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. Indeed, all praise and thanks belongs to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala alone. We seek His help, His assistance and guidance in all things. He whom Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala guides, there is no misguidance for him. And he whom Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala leads astray, there is no guidance for him except through the will and permission of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala alone. And I bear witness and testify that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, and that Muhammad Ibn Abdullah Ibn Abdul Muttalib Al-Hashimi Al-Qurashi was the final messenger and prophet sent to all of mankind. O you who believe, fear Allah as He deserves to be feared, and do not die except in the state of Islam, do not die except that you are Muslims. Amma ba'd. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Today is the first class of this lesson, which is the beginning of the book Ad-Da' wad-Dawa of Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah, the disease and the cure. But before we start the book, there's just a few things we'd like to go through. Firstly, we'd like to thank the brothers at ASWJ Auburn, Barakallahu Fihum, our Sheikh Khalid, and our beautiful brother Abdul Kareem, Hafidahumullah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make these classes beneficial for us and for all of you attending. Barakallahu Fikum. This lesson is, insha'Allah, we're going to aim to have it to be every Friday night for around 40 to 50 minutes, bi'idhnillahi tabaraka wa ta'ala. And what it is essentially is a short explanation on the kalam, on the words of Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah. And what we want to do basically is we want to go through each chapter, and we want to look at each of the narrations, and we want to see what is sahih, what is da'if, and we want to have an explanation on the chapter itself, because each chapter, subhanAllah, is very, very important. The problem that we have is that the book is very long. The book is almost, in English, 530 pages. The aim is that we want to get through as much of the book, but we want to serve the book. We don't want to rewrite the book. The aim for us is to give you the meaning of each chapter, insha'Allah. And the aim is that you leave here understanding the kalam of Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah, and you leave here with something that you can implement in your daily lives. The book that we're going to go through, inshallah, we'll talk about it a little bit more in some detail, but it is the main book, it is the asl for the last maybe 600 years for Tazkiyatun Nafs, the purification of the soul, among the creed, among the people who follow the creed of Quran and Sunnah. The book itself is very essential. It is requested by a lot of the mashayikh and the ulama that it is the first book that one should read of Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah before getting into the heavier stuff. And inshallah, when we do go through this, you'll see why this book is held in such high regard. And inshallah, we'll talk about some of the ulama, what they have said about this book today, bi'idhnillahi tabaraka wa ta'ala. This book, subhanallah, because it is long, as us, as students of knowledge, we need to have patience with the book and not aim to finish it in a lesson or two. This will be a long-lasting class. Insha'Allah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to give us the strength to finish this book bi'idhnillahi tabaraka wa ta'ala. But the main thing that I'd like you all to have is the right intention. And the intention is that we are here seeking knowledge, and we are here not necessarily this is not a pump-up class, this is not a G-up class, this is a class where inshallah you will learn what the Quran and the Sunnah says in many different things of the Sunnah, many different aspects of this deen, from dua to love. Everything in between, this book goes through it, subhanAllah. And this is a very, very essential book for everyone. There are scholars who have said to read this constantly throughout the year, even on a 2-month basis. Subhanallah. I want you all to remember that this is one of the sunnahs of the ulama that we are trying to give life to. Of taking a book from cover to cover, a book that was written by an imam, a book that insha'Allah you will benefit from and we will benefit from it also. But I want you also to remember that this essentially requires sacrifice. To have patience with this book, to be coming in weekly, to be listening in weekly. And we have to remember the hadith of Abi Hurairah radiallahu anhu. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من سلك طريقا يلتمس فيه علما سهل الله له به طريقا إلى الجنة رواه مسلم. The hadith of Abi Hurairah is collected by Imam Muslim Rahimahullah, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, whoever travels or treads a path in search of knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make easy for him a path to paradise. And remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves what you do when you do it sincerely for His sake and you do it consistently for His sake, even if they're small. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, as recorded by Aisha radiallahu anha, as collected by Bukhari rahimahullah, عن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وأن أحب الأعمال أدومها إلى الله وإن قل. Aisha radiallahu anha narrates that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam says that the most beloved actions to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most consistent even if they are small. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept this small sacrifice from us and to help us and allow us to benefit from these classes. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it a means of benefit for all of us, Ya Rabb. Before we start any book, subhanAllah, the way of the scholars is that we have learned is that you need to know the author first. And when you do know the author, you have a greater appreciation for the book. And so we need to start and we need to understand who Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah was. Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah was obviously one of the great scholars of Islam, one of the great scholars of the Quran and the Sunnah, a light from the lights of truth, a defender of the way of the pious predecessors. The scholars called him Tabib al-Qalb, the doctor of the heart, the spiritual doctor of the heart. And subhanallah, we'll begin with his name, something just brief. Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr. The people referred to him as Shams al-Din. So his name is Muhammad ibn Al Qayyim, Muhammad bin Abi Bakr. His father's name was Abu Bakr. And his kunya was Abu Abdullah, the father of Abdullah. And the people referred to him as a Shams al-Din. Shams al-Din, which means the light. That what it essentially means is that the light of the knowledge of Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah was like that of the sun upon the earth. That is how deep his knowledge was. When someone is referred to as Shams al-Din, it is rivaling them to the sun, the effect the sun has on the earth. And when we say al-Jawziyah, we've heard of his name, Ibn Al Qayyim, or Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah. Al-Jawziyah is a school that was present in Damascus. It was founded by the youngest son of Ibn al-Jawzi, rahimahullah, in the year 652. Now, the principal of this school, or the dean of this school, the person who would take care of this school, would be called Al-Qayyim. So, the father of Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, Abu Bakr himself, was the leader, was in charge, or was the principal of this school. And that is why he is called Ibn Al Qayyim, the son of the principal. And also mentioned Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, the son of the principal of the school of al-Jawziyah, which was Ibn Jawzi's youngest son, who initiated and instituted this organization. And subhanAllah, this school was present in Damascus up until almost 100 years ago, when it was burnt, when the French had their operations in Syria. It was burnt to the ground with other things in Syria that was subhanAllah burnt, but it lasted for hundreds of years, subhanAllah, this college, this institution of learning. And subhanallah, what we want to go through is his life in very, very brief form. Nothing too deep, inshallah. Hopefully this class, because it is the first class, usually our mashayikh, they took it easier on us the first class, so inshallah this won't go for too long, bi'idhnillah. That his birth, he was born on the 7th of Safar in the year 691. And we say that it was most probably in Syria, because the actual place is not really mentioned in a lot of his siyar, but because most of his early life was present in Syria, and most of his early life and his talab al-ilm and even his death was in Damascus, in Syria itself, so it is probable that he was born in Syria. But from his early life, the first scholar that he started to study with was his own father. His own father was a scholar. Some said he was a great linguist, someone who knew Nahu very, very well. And that is the first place that he started to study, in his own home. And at the age of 6, he was actually enrolled going to the school of Al-Jawziyah, where his father was the dean, the principal itself. And subhanallah, Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah studied with some of the greatest scholars of this deen. And from the most notable, Hafiz al-Mizzi, who wrote the great book, like there's many books that he's written, but if you look at the main book that he is known, it's of the Tuhfat al-Ashraf, is one of the main books that he's written, which is a compilation of basically a reference guide for the entire Sunnah of the Kutub al-Sittah. But obviously, he's not known for this scholar and his relationship with Hafiz al-Mizzi. Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah is renowned for not being the student of one scholar in particular. In the year 712, Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah met in person the person who would go on to shape not only his life, but what he would be remembered for, insha'Allah, till the Day of Judgment. Upon the return of this man, when he returned from Egypt back to Damascus in the year 712 Hijri, Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah met Shaykh al-Islam Taqiyuddin Ahmad ibn Abdul Halim ibn Taymiyyah Rahimahullah. And from this meeting, when he met Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, it fell in his heart and love entered his heart for this Shaykh, and he did mulazama. He became his close and intimate student for over 17 years, until the death of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. Subhanallah, he became not just his student, but of his closest students. He would defend and he would carry on the positions of the Imam Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. And something that I would want to bring, how, like for instance, we use Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah's works through Ibn Al Qayyim. Ibn Al Qayyim helps us understand the positions of Shaykh al-Islam. How? I'll give you an example, the famous example of the qawl of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, بِفَنَاءٍ النَّارِ. That there is a statement that says that Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, says that Jahannam is not eternal. That Jahannam will eventually come to an end. This is the claim. And so, if someone takes this statement of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, we can look at it by two different ways. The first way is to look at Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah's works as a whole. And we find in various spots, not just in one or two works, we find in various places, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, for instance, is found in the 17th and 18th volume of Majmu' al-Fatawa, when he says that Jahannam is eternal by consensus of the ulama. Jahannam is eternal by the consensus of the ulama. But if we didn't have these statements, one of the ways that we helps us understand what the position of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah was to go through his close and intimate student, Ibn Al Qayyim. And so if we look at what Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah mentions in Wabil al-Sayyid, we see when he talks about the nar, the fire itself, he says that what we are talking about when we say that there is a portion in Jahannam that will come to an end, narul muwahhideen. So as we all know, that the sins of a believer, you are either under the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or you will be punished from the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so there are a portion of people who are Muslim, who have sinned, who will be punished by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they will enter the hellfire. But we know in the famous hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, where he will go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he will ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to release people from Jahannam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after the constant requests of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, will free people from Jahannam, those who have Iman, that of a mustard seed, a minute amount of Iman. So Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah Rahimahullah and Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah, what they say is that there is a portion where these Muslims will be. And once Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove them from Jahannam, this part becomes empty. And then it has no purpose. Therefore it will come to an end. Not that all of Jahannam will come to an end. No, just this specific part. So when we look at this, it helps us understand the positions of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, and it helps us come to what the positions were at that time. SubhanAllah, if we look at the relationship between Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Al Qayyim, it really shows how deep the love was for one another, and it shows how much respect was there, and it also shows what type of man Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah was. And this is from the greatest testaments of how great a person is how great do the students hold them to be. And so if we look at a story as mentioned, as a quote mentioned by Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah, again in Wabil al-Sayyid, he mentioned something beautiful. He says that when we would be in a state of fear, when we would be overcome by anxiety and grief, we would come to Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, and when we would see him and when we would hear him, the words of Shaykh al-Islam, all of our worries would disappear, and our hearts would expand, and we would feel strength, certainty and tranquility. SubhanAllah, just by hearing and listening to the Imam, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, they were overcome, and they were a source, they seen the Shaykh as a source of strength and tranquility that they could feel just by looking at him and just by hearing him speak. Another story that shows us the nature of the relationship between the two. And subhanAllah, this story shows the type of person Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah was and the type of influence he had upon his students. The story is, as found in Madarij al-Salikin, a great work of Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah, he says, جِئْتُ يَوْمًا مُبَشِّرًا لَهْ بِمَوْتِ أَكْبَرِ أَعْدَائِهِ, that I came to Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah one day, giving him glad tidings upon the death of his worst enemy. Ibn Al Qayyim now hears of news that one of the enemies of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah has passed away. So he goes to Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, happy that someone has passed away, and he's giving him as if it is great good news. And he continues, this is Ibn Al Qayyim coming to Shaykh al-Islam, and he says, وَأَشَدِّهِمْ عَدَاوَةً وَآذًا لَهُ, that he was Shaykh al-Islam's staunchest enemy, and someone who brought him great harm. What did Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah do? He says, فَنَهَرَنِي وَتَنَكَّرَ لِي وَاسْتَرْجَعَ. Then he says that he rebuked me and advised me, and he said, إِنَّ لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. To Allah we belong, indeed to Allah we belong, and to Him we return. This is how he dealt with the news of someone who brought him actual harm, someone who was actually an enemy to him. And then Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah, he mentions ثُمَّ قَامَ مِنْ فَوْرِهِ إلى بيت أهله فعزاهم. And he immediately left his spot and he went to the household of this person who was an enemy to him, and he gave condolences to the family. And he says, well, Shaykh al-Islam says, Ibn Al Qayyim says that Shaykh al-Islam says, وَقَالَ إِنِّي لَكُمْ مَكَانًا وَلَا يَكُونُ لَكُمْ أَمْرٌ تَحْتَاجُونَ فِيهِ إِلَى مُسَاعَدَةٍ إِلَّا وَسَاعَدْتُكُمْ فِيهِ. That Ibn Al Qayyim says that Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah says, I am for you in his place, yani your father's place, or your husband's place, the person who has died, as if I am there for you. And he says there is not a single thing that you will need except that I will assist you in it. And then he says, فَسُرُّوا بِهِ وَدَعَوْا لَهُ وَعَظَّمُوا هَذِهِ الْحَالِ مِنْهُ. And Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah says, and they became happy with these words, and they made dua for him and appreciated his position. And this is the type of man that Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah Rahimahullah was. But the main aspect that I want to focus on is that Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah here was the one who came with news to Ibn Taymiyyah, and he was rebuked by Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. Shaykh al-Islam didn't see that what he was doing is right. You don't take joy out of the death of a Muslim. So what he did was he rebuked him. He was a murabbi. He was someone who would hold the students and try to guide them in the best way. And the fact that Shaykh al-Islam did this, and Ibn Al Qayyim mentions this in this story, Ibn Al Qayyim is almost saying that this is what I needed at that time. This is the type of tarbiyah that I needed at that time. Yani he's now passing on that influence to his students. Subhanallah. Another thing that I want to touch on just very quickly, inshallah, is the memory of Ibn Al Qayyim. Subhanallah, he was an ayah min ayatillah. He was almost like a miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of how vast his memory was. They say that he used to write entire books completely off memory with thousands of athar in it. The entire book Zad al-Ma'ad, which is 7 volumes of today. So imagine how much it would have been before, because before the awraq used to be thicker, the text used to be bigger. He wrote in that volumes, it was over 7 volumes. It's mentioned that he did it completely while riding a camel, with not another single book in his hand, completely from memory, and there's over thousands of narrations in it, subhanAllah. And this just shows what type of great, it was a miracle, the type of hifz these men had, subhanAllah. And another thing that we want to touch on is the link between the works of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Al Qayyim. Now, obviously, the works of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah are very precise, but they are difficult to read. It's the ibarat that are used, the wordings that are used, the phrases that are used are very difficult. And one of the things that was mentioned about Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah is that the wordings that he used and the way that he used to set up his books was something that was very, very good. So the scholars, they do say that the works of Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah are easier to read. And they say that it is because he did study under Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah for around 17 years, that he was able to take the knowledge and produce it in a different way. But they do say that there are certain things that you can do by benefiting from the works of Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah, so that you can go into the works of Ibn Taymiyyah Rahimahullah. Like for instance, the book of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, Dar Ta'arud al-Aql wal-Naql, it is said that if you can read the book of Ibn Al Qayyim, As-Sawa'iq al-Mursala, before it will help you, because it's easier and the arguments are very similar, but the fact that one will help you read the other, because one is easier. This is just something that is mentioned, that the works of Ibn Al Qayyim are easier to understand than the works of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. However, as mentioned by Imam al-Sa'di, Rahimahullah, as mentioned by Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah, he says, whenever you do find of Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Al Qayyim, take it and try to read it as much as you can. Hold on to these two scholars and hold on to their works. The death of Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah, the Imam himself passed on the 13th of Rajab in Syria in 551 Hijri. And if we look at some of the main students of his, the most famous student that Ibn Al Qayyim had was Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali. But there were other students as well, like some scholars mentioned that Hafiz Ibn Kathir Rahimahullah also benefited from Ibn Al Qayyim Rahimahullah. Now, what I want to talk to you just very, very briefly, I don't want to make this this class go over the half-hour mark, inshallah. But what we want to do, just very, very basic, is firstly the name of this book, Ad-Da' wad-Dawa, the disease and the cure. It is also known as Jawab al-Kafi liman sa'ala an ad-dawa al-shafi, the sufficient answer to the one who asks for the healing cure. Now, the scholars obviously have talked about this book in great depth, and from the Mu'asirin, from those who are currently alive, was the Shaykh Abdul Razzaq bin Abdul Muhsin Abbad, the son of the Muhaddith of Medina, Shaykh Abdul Razzaq, who states that this book itself is one of the greatest books of Tazkiyatun Nafs, of the spiritual healing and basically the purification of the heart. And he says that this is a book that focuses on how to abandon sin, how to be free from sin. Now, in the English language, Walillah alhamd, it has been translated 3 times. This translation, published by Hikmah Publications, is the best out of the 3, Wallahu a'lam. The other, there is another one printed by Dar es Salaam UK, and there's another one printed by Al-Firdaus. However, this one, Walillah alhamd, the translation and the quality of the translation is mashallah tabarak ar-Rahman, pretty much on the ball. I would say, if anyone wants to follow on with this class, to follow on with the translation as found by Hikmah Publications. The only problem is, because of COVID at the moment, the book is sold out in a lot of places in Australia. But I know the brothers at darussalam.com.au, they do have it available, but the problem is that it will be here in around 6 to 8 weeks. Nas'allah salam al afiyah. But if you can wait, inshallah, when the brothers and sisters, if anyone does follow on, what I will do bi'idhnillahi tabaraka wa ta'ala is that if anyone does get the book later on, I'll take the scans of everything that we have taken, especially the hukum of the hadith. If a hadith or athar is sahih or da'if, we'll take either scans of it and we'll send it around, inshallah. But I do really think that it's worth the wait to keep this copy itself, because the other one is not clear, and to be honest has a few mistakes in it, in the translation itself. Wallahu a'lam. But I really do like this print, and inshallah we'll go through next week bi'idhnillahi tabaraka wa ta'ala what this book goes through, inshallah, and we'll begin the book bi'idhnillah. But just before we leave, the question itself, there's this entire book, subhanAllah, and we'll go into this in a little bit of detail next week, but this entire book is a response to a question. This entire book is a fatwa. 530 pages is a response to a question from one man, not even a group of people, from one man. And the question is, what do the distinguished scholars, the vanguards of this religion, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with them all, say regarding a man who has been afflicted with a calamity and knows that if it continues, it shall ruin his worldly affairs as well as his afterlife. This is despite the fact that he has endeavored to repel it from himself with every means, though it only increases in intensity and severity. What is the method in repelling it, and how can it be resolved? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on the one who aids the afflicted one. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala aids his servant as long as he aids his brother. Provide us with a verdict. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on you, and may he be pleased with you. That was the question that was posed to Ibn Qayyim Rahimahullah, and from the dalil that the person was sincere in his question was that Ibn Qayyim produced this book for the whole ummah. Subhanallah. But we'll go through the question inshallah, and we'll go through the meaning of the question inshallah in some detail. Inshallah we'll start next week bi'idhnillahi tabarak wa ta'ala. I ask you all to forgive me for my shortcomings, and wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. وجزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.